Welcome to the Republic of Philosophy. My name is the Republican, and today I'm going to be reading Kant's Critique of Puris in the introduction, section 5. In all theoretical sciences of reason, synthetic a priori judgments are contained as principle. All mathematical judgments, without exception, are synthetic. This fact, though incontestably certain and in its consequences very important, has hitherto escaped the notice of those who are engaged in the analysis of human reason, and is indeed directly opposed to all their conjectures. For as it was found that all mathematical inferences proceed in accordance with the principle of contradiction, which the nature of all apodictic certainty requires, it was supposed that the fundamental propositions of the science can themselves be known to be true through that principle. This is an erroneous view. For though a synthetic proposition can indeed be discerned in accordance with the principle of contradiction, this can only be if another synthetic proposition is presupposed, and if it can then be apprehended as follows from this other proposition. It can never be so discerned in and by itself. First of all, it has to be noted that mathematical propositions, strictly so called, are always judgments a priori, not empirical, because they carry with them necessity, which cannot be derived from experience. If this be demurred to, I am willing to limit my statement to pure mathematics, the very concept of which implies that it does not contain empirical but only pure a priori knowledge. We might indeed at first suppose that the proposition 7 plus 5 equals 12 is a merely analytic proposition and follows by the principle of contradiction from the concept of a sum 7 and 5. But if we look more closely, we find that the concept of the sum 7 and 5 contains nothing save the union of the two numbers into one, and in this no thought is being taken as to what the single number may be which combines both. The concept of 12 is by no means already thought in merely thinking this union of 7 and 5, and I may analyze my concept of such a possible sum as long as I please. Still, I shall never find the 12 in it. We have to go outside these concepts and call in the aid of the intuition which corresponds to one of them, our 5 fingers, for instance, or as Senger does in his arithmetic 5 points, adding the concept of 7, unity, by unit, and unit, the 5 given in intuition. For starting with the number 7, and for the concept of 5 calling in the aid of the fingers of my hand as intuition, I now add one by one to the number 7 the units which I previously took together to form the number 5, and with the aid of that figure, the hand, see the number 12 coming into being. That 5 should be added to 7, I have indeed already thought in a concept of a sum sum equals 7 plus 5, but not that this sum is equivalent to the number 12. Arithmetical propositions are therefore always synthetic. This is still more evident if we take large numbers, for it is then obvious that however we might turn and twist our concepts, we could never by the mere analysis of them and without the aid of intuition discover what the number is that is the sum. Just as little as any fundamental proposition of pure geometry analytic, that the straight line between 2 points is the shortest, is a synthetic proposition. For my concept of straight contains nothing of quantity, but only of quality. The concept of the shortest is wholly an addition, and cannot be derived through any process of analysis from the concept of the straight line. Intuition, therefore, must here be called in only by its aid is the synthesis possible. What here causes us commonly to believe that the predicate of such apodictic judgments is already contained in our concept, and that the judgment is therefore analytic is merely the ambiguous character of the terms used. We are required to join in thought a certain predicate to give given to a given concept, and this necessity is inherent in the concepts themselves. But the question is not what we ought to join in thought to a given concept, but what we actually think of it, even if only obscurely. And it is then manifest that while the predicate is indeed attached necessarily to the concept, it is so in virtue of an intuition which must be added to the concept, not as thought in the concept itself. Some few fundamental propositions presupposed by the geometrician are indeed really analytic and rest on the principle of contradiction, but as identical propositions. They serve only as links in the chain of method and not as principles. For instance, A equals A. The whole of the equal to itself, or A plus B, is greater than A. That is, the whole is greater than the part, and even these propositions, though they are valid according to pure concepts, are only admitted in mathematics because they can be exhibited in intuition. 2. Natural science, physics, contains a priori synthetic judgments as principles. I need cite only 2 such judgments: that in all changes of the material world, the quantity of matter remains unchanged, and that in all communications of motion, action and reaction must always be equal. Both propositions, it is evident, are not only necessary and therefore in their origin a priori, but also synthetic. For in the concept of matter, I do not think its permanence, but only its presence in the space which it occupies. I go outside and beyond the concept of matter, joining to it a priori in thought something which I have not thought in it. The proposition is not, therefore, an analytic but synthetic, and yet is thought a priori, and so likewise are the other propositions of pure part of natural science. 3. Metaphysics. Even if we look upon it as having hitherto failed in all its endeavours, is yet, owing to the nature of human reason, a quite indispensable science, and ought to contain a priori synthetic knowledge. For its business is not merely to analyse concepts which we make for ourselves a priori of things, and thereby to clarify them analytically, but to extend our a priori knowledge. And for this purpose, we must employ principles which add to the given concept something that was not contained in it, and through a priori synthetic judgments venture out so far the experience is quite unable to follow us. For instance, in the proposition that the world must have a first beginning, and such like. Thus, metaphysics consists, at least in intention, entirely of a priori synthetic propositions.